Hey guys, Daniel James here, and today we're going to be doing another beginner series tutorial, this time on the basics of EQ. So if I swap over to my main screen here, what I'm going to do is play a little bit of a track I've been working on, and we're going to EQ that, and I'll explain how to EQ and the basics of how you get around to doing it. So here's the track we're going to be working with. Okay, so if you've watched the previous tutorials, you should by now know how to load a plugin in, just in case you don't. Depending on your DAW, it changes from person to person, but basically you're loading in a plugin, so I'm just going to find my EQ8 here and drag it in. So there we go. So if you look down here, we now have an EQ. So an EQ, the purpose of an EQ essentially is to cut or boost frequencies of any given sound in order to make it fit in context with the rest of the instruments. That sounds like a lot of information, but in practice, it's quite simple. So what I'm going to do is just load up the brass by itself here, and I'll show you the principle of EQ. So if we take a listen to this first. So some of you may not have even heard anything particularly wrong with that, and there may not be to most people. So, but if you look down here, we're going to be working with EQ8 today, which is a parametric EQ, which we'll talk about the difference between EQs a bit later. So basically, each of these numbers here is a band, and each band can either cut or boost frequencies. It's that simple. So if I pull it up, I'm boosting, and if I pull it down, I'm cutting. So I'll just show you that in practice so you can hear what it's doing. And so that's literally the basics of it. That's the most simple way you can look at EQ. So what I'm going to do here, this is a process I call bell sweeping, which sounds like it could be rude. But essentially what we're doing when we EQ is we're looking for sounds, first off, that sound harsh or unpleasing to the ears. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this band here, and I'm just going to sweep along. I'm going to turn it up like this and sweep along till I find a frequency which hurts my ears. And you can usually tell ones that are resonating or resonant frequencies because they'll sound louder than everything else. So if I turn this up now. So that frequency there is quite disgusting. So what I'm going to do now is, if you look here, we have a control called Q, which is actually specific to parametric EQs, but we'll get to that in a minute. So if I turn the Q up, it makes the band thinner. So again, we'll listen to that in context. It's very harsh. I apologize for that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull that harsh or horrible sounding frequency, and I'm just going to turn the gain and cut it. And what the aim here is not to completely get rid of that frequency. It's to pull it down so that it kind of melts better with the rest of the track. So it's not poking out. It's not harsh. And I'm just doing this to an entire group here. You could do this to individual tracks if you like. But then let's move on to boosting. So let's say I wanted this to be a little bit more present in the high end. So what I can now pull up one of these frequencies, and a good way of doing this is just sweeping with the bell until you find a frequency that feels like it's got either the air or the presence that you're looking for. And when you're boosting, you want to be very careful not to make it sound harsh or unappealing. So we'll just turn this up a bit. And again, we'll keep adding bands. If you look down the bottom here, you'll see these have different shapes. So there's different types. There's ones that create essentially bells. There's ones that do, I mean, again, I won't go into the names of them all today. but like you've got a low shelf, which basically pulls down a shape like this. Then you have like a low cut or a high pass, which looks like this. A low cut is very self-explanatory. It cuts the low frequencies out, and then like a high cut will do that. A high cut is also known as a low pass because it lets the low frequencies through, and vice versa. A low cut is also called a high pass, but they're interchangeable. But like for right now, that's irrelevant. Anyway, so for now, we're just going to use the bell shape, and again, we're just going to sweep through. And again, this process you just keep doing till it sounds right to you. There's no correct way to EQ. I mean, there's wrong ways to EQ, but there's no like definitive answer to no definitive way to do EQ. So now if I turn the solo off and we listen to it in context of the track. So now a lot of those harsh frequencies are missing. So now I'm just going to show you another little concept, something to keep in mind when you're EQing, is having things in instruments that you don't need. So now in the brass, you know, it sounded great by itself, but if we put it with the bass line, you'll hear the bass line is covering that low end, and the brass doesn't really need it that much. So going back over here, what I'll do is I'll make a new EQ band, and you mentioned a few seconds ago I was mentioning the high pass or low cut filter. So we'll do that shape, and what we'll do is we'll just round off some of these low frequencies. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically just getting the sounds we don't need out the way, and all that'll do is make the image clearer for the instruments that do have it. So if we like, you don't want to go too far. I mean, and if I turn this off and on, you probably won't even notice much of a difference in terms of the actual sound. But when you get to things like compression, limiting and stuff, the more you cut frequencies like that, the easier it will be for you in the long run to either turn things up or keep the dynamics in check. But again, that's something for a different day, a different tutorial. So let me now talk about the different types of EQ. So like I mentioned, this is a parametric EQ, which essentially means I can change the cue size. So if you remember me doing the bell shape here, it allows me to make how many frequencies I'm basically working with. So the higher the cue, the thinner it is. So I'm working with very fine amounts of frequencies, a very small amount. Whereas if I do like a really wide band, I'm affecting a whole chunk of frequencies. So there's this type, and then if we move over to like the different types. So this one here counts as a parametric EQ. This is in I forget which one it's called, but the FGS in Virtual Mix Rack. Again, the names are kind of irrelevant, but we're just looking at the different types. So, you know, you turn the gain up here, which is the same as this dial here. You have the frequency, which is moving left and right down this. So again, like if I move the frequency, you'll see it's moving up and down, left and right, the frequencies, with the low being on the left, high being on the right. And the cue being how wide or how fat that bell is. And then over here we have a fixed EQ, and these ones you can't change the cue. You can't change how wide and how short they are. There are a few like this, and these ones are more for like so ones, you know, parametric ones are more surgical. So you're looking for harsh sounds, or you're looking for you know, like sounds that just don't sound pleasing, ones you want to cut, get rid of. They're like more of a surgical thing. That's what you use a parametric for, because you can get really fine like this. You can get a very fine and, you know, just pull down frequencies that you don't like. Whereas fixed ones are more for overall blending of a sound. Like each one of each fixed EQ unit will have like its own sound, because it'll have its own selection of frequencies that you're working with. So if I play it now. quite like how, like, I like that high end range. So maybe I want to boost that just a tiny bit. And again with the mids. And that's quite a harsh sound, so I'm just going to pull that one down a bit. And this one in particular has a high pass or has a high pass or a low cut. So again, if I want to cut so I'm essentially here doing what this one here is doing. So that's what that one looks like. I didn't have one to hand, but I'll just show you another type, which is called a graphic EQ, which is a similar thing, but you can't change the frequency or the Q. You are basically just given a selection of frequencies which you can drag up. So this is 125 hertz, which here would be like 125 hertz would be around here. So, I mean, that's literally the basics of EQ. There's a lot to take in there. There is another type of EQ, but this is a little bit more on the advanced scale. This works more like a compressor. Again, a video we'll go into on a different day. But a dynamic EQ is more of a modern type EQ. And what this does is it doesn't cut the frequencies out of the signal for the entire time. A regular EQ, if I pull down here, this is cutting 2.14 decibels out of 1.37 kilohertz, which again, all the numbers make it sound more complicated than it is. It's basically I'm cutting 2 decibels out of this area, right? And that's gonna be a cut that's there the whole time. Whereas a dynamic EQ will only cut to a certain degree. It'll only cut those frequencies if those frequencies go over a certain level. So if those frequencies get too loud, this EQ will pull them down once they go over by a certain amount. So if we look at what that looks like. So let's say like this area here where it was poking out. So if we pull this down, you'll see the EQ band is pulling down at a ratio with how far up it goes. So if it goes over by, you know, I'll just get rid of the mumbo jumbo. If it goes over the amount you set by 5, it will pull down by 5. And you can set at what point it does that here, you know. So like if I set this really far down, it's just going to be a constant cut. So if I pull it up here, this will show you the volume of those frequency bands. So if I want to do it so it's only happening when it's, you know, when it's really loud, I pull it up here. And if you see that line, you can see it pulling the frequencies down as it gets louder. So that's more of a modern type thing. And there are other EQs, again, another parametric one. This one's quite useful because it shows you the frequency band. And I mean, there's no, like I say, there's no hard and fast rules for EQ. Like the general feeling is you want it to be quite a balanced sound. So you see like here, for example, this frequency is kind of pulling up a bit. So, you know, the good thing about this EQ is I can literally grab the band and just pull it down and it will, you know, it will cut those frequencies. So I'm just leveling it out a bit. And that's literally all there is to it. It's you do that. Again, you can do it for a whole group or you can do it for a group, which I showed in the previous video how to do if you haven't seen. So I can either apply that to a whole group, I can apply it to individual instruments, or I can apply it to an entire track. So again, if I just, as a point of showing you EQ one last time, if I come down here, this is my master bus. So all the sound in my DAW is coming through this track. So now, if I put an EQ on it, this is now going to affect everything of the entire song. So that's quite a messy sound. So we'll just cut that down and we'll bring the Q up because we don't want to take out too much of the life out of the master bus. And you can see my bass here is really heavy. So maybe I'll put this on like a shelf. Again, a shelf is just it's a different type of shape. It's like anything under that is pulled down by a certain amount. So I'll just pull that down a bit. And again, this is a process you repeat until you're happy. And the thing with EQ you need to keep in mind is it's what sounds good to you. You're the composer, so you're the one, you're the composer or the mixer. You're the person in charge of the creative decision. If you want to EQ something beyond recognition, that's fine, so long as you think it sounds good. And this next little trick's a bit more advanced, but I'm just going to show you guys anyway for anybody who may be watching and wants to try something a bit fun. There's a process called MS, or MidSide, which essentially means you can affect the mono signal, mono meaning the sounds that are in dead center, so they're basically one speaker, it'll come from the middle. You can edit that EQ separate to the sound of the stereo. So the sounds that feel like they're coming from the side, you can edit differently to the one down the middle. Now that may seem complex, but the main reason I use it is when you have bass frequencies, low frequencies, when they're out in the stereo field, they can phase, they can clash when they get into a room much easier than if they're mono. Because when they're mono, they're dead center, so there's less of a problem of the bass frequencies hitting your ears or hitting themselves in the room at different times. So the EQ8 in Ableton has like a cool feature, an MS feature. So if I come down here now, I'll just work with the strings for now. Actually, no, there's not much bass there. So I'm just going to put the bass back in the brass. Let's do it with the brass. So the MidSide EQ of Ableton, what I can do is now I can edit. You see like there's two bands. So now I'm editing the mono signal, or the mid, and the S is I'm editing the stereo. So what I want to do is take the bass completely out of the side speakers. I don't want them in the side. I only want the mono. So I'm just going to turn on that low cut and pull that down. So now there's zero bass in the side channel, only down the middle. And again, this is a little bit advanced for beginners, so you know, if you're not following along, that's fine. You will get up to this stage, I promise you, and you can look back and go, I get what he's talking about now. And also, you know, like this is more of a sound design thing, but say you wanted the high end of your strings to not be in the middle, you just wanted them out the side, you can pull that down there. So you'll hear that's a very mono signal because I've taken all the frequencies out the stereo or the side. So that's a way of controlling like a stereo field, but we'll go more into stereo field in another video. But yeah, that's the basics and maybe a little bit more than basics of EQ. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions or I cocked anything up, you know, let me know in the comments like you usually do. Yeah, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Edit.